We're going to be exploring different ways to loop through the contents of an array. So creating an array using a for loop where we're using the index value. The value of I is the index value in order to output the array contents. And then the while loop, which is going to be the same concept as the for loop, except it's structured slightly differently. And then the for each method for arrays allows us to loop through, get the item, the index, and the array that we're iterating through. And then there's map and filter, which are actually going to be returning back a new array from that existing array, but while it's going through all of the items of the array, you can also log out those values. And in this case, we're logging them out into the console as we're creating the new arrays. So there's the results for, there's the results for while, there's the results for each, results for map, and results for filter. So 5 different ways looping through the array contents. Open up your JS file and we're going to create a quick array. So just adding in some data into the array and then loop through the contents of the array. So this can be a list of string values that we want to loop through and output the results. So I'm going to just have 4 names there within the array. Save that. We can log the array out into the console. I have the developer tools opened on the right hand side. That's where we're seeing the contents of the JavaScript console. So that's just being output in the bottom right hand side. So now let's loop through the contents of the array. So we've got a few different options that we can use. So one of them is using the for loop. So setting the value of I to 0. And as we know with arrays, they're 0 based. So the index value of the first item is going to be 0. And then we can loop through while we're looping through, and while the value of I is less than the length of the array. So within the arrays, we've got a property value of length. You can open that up and you can see the value of the length, and this will increase depending on how many items that we have within the array. So looping through and incrementing I by 1. And now if we want to output the result of the item from the array, we can use the array, and using the I that we're looping through and incrementing as the index value will allow us to output all of the items from the array. So that's how you can use the for loop. You can also use a while loop. So the idea is going to be the same, where we set a value for I and then using while, looping through while I is less than the array length. So again, the same idea as the for loop, where we loop through, and then we also have to increment I within the while so that we have a way out of the loop. And then outputting the console value is going to be the same, where we have to output it using the array, and then the value of I is going to be the index value. So let's output into the console that this is going to be the while loop. This is an example of using the for loop in the example. And there's also a for each. So this is actually my preferred way to do the loop, and that's using the for each method, which is an array method that allows us to easily iterate through the array. So we set the array, and then using for each method, we can loop through each one of the items in the array and then output the results from that. And this is expecting a function. So you can use the arrow format as you loop through each one of the items, and you can get some values. So you can get the item value, you can return back its index, and then also the parent array as well. And then into the console, if we just want to see the item, we can output the item value. So this would be doing a for each loop, and that's the result that we have down here at the bottom. I'm going to add in some asterisks so that it's easier to distinguish which one that we're on and which one that we're doing. So we've got the for each, we've got the while, and then the for loop. So those are 3 different ways to output the content of the array. And there's also some other methods as well. So if you are using map, that's another way that you can output the contents as you're going through each one of the items in the array, and using map goes through each one of the items. And this is not going to be in place, so it's going to create a new array. So it's going to have a returned result, but it's still going to be looping through each one of the items in the array. We select the array, and then we do a map, and the map is going to have each one of those items. And then as we're returning back the items, we can console log the new values as we're iterating through. So this is going to be the map result. And then if we want to see the result for array 1, they're all going to be undefined. So for map, we need to return back the item value in order to populate the new array with whatever values that we have. And this is also a way that we can update some of the values. So if we want to return back a separate value, so we've got the item value, but within each one of these, we want to include whatever the current index is. You can do this as well. So now if I loop and we get the value for array 1, that's going to include the original index values that we had. So map, what it does is it reconstructs and creates a new array from the existing array. There's also a filter method. So this is also going to create a new instance of the array, but we do loop through all of the existing contents of the array as we use the filter method. And filter can select out the contents and return back the contents of them. So that's going to be doing the same thing that we saw with map. And if we do a console log of the second array that was created, so this is a brand new array that was created, because we're not really filtering for anything, we're returning back all of the items, we're still getting all of the filtered items being returned back into the array. And we don't necessarily need to have the function code where we're doing a return back. We just need to select what we're filtering by. So if we want to filter by a string, that will do the same thing where we're looping through and we're using the filter. But if we want to output each item as it goes through, then we need to apply the function in order to do the result of the item. So that will create the filter, and once again we'll do the return of the item content from the filter, and that's going to output it into the console. So those are some different ways that you can loop through the contents of the array, and the last two, using map and filter, are actually creating brand new arrays as we're iterating through the contents of the original array.